People flocking in, okay. Welcome to United Europe's panel discussion. Thank you for being here with us today. We're going to talk about creating enlightened business models in the digital space. Before we start the conversation, allow me to say a few words about tonight's host, United Europe. United Europe was founded by former Austrian Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssel and entrepreneur Jürgen Grossmann. It is currently headed by former EU Commissioner Günther Oettinger, together with 12 fellow board members from 6 member states. United Europe's membership includes prominent firms such as PwC, Ernst & Young, RWE, E.ON, and many, many more. The aim of United Europe is to convene leading industry experts from business, academia, and policy across Europe to develop solutions for a strong, competitive, and united Europe. So let's get started today. I would like to hand over to my colleague, Omri Price, who's Managing Director at Alliance for Europe, and who's moderating the discussion today.
Thanks a lot, Daria. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to be having the discussion with all of you. Thanks very much. First of all, let me say a little bit about Alliance for Europe and about myself. I'm based in Brussels. I'm the managing director and one of the co-founders of Alliance for Europe. We are a non-profit that wants to activate European citizens towards a more democratic Europe. And of course, in our day and age, this issue of tech and having a values-based digital space is very, very important for us in terms of the foundations that our 21st century democracy needs to rest on. So it's been a real pleasure working with United Europe on this, with Daria and James. Hi, James, I see you over there. What we really want to talk about in the context of European efforts to create a values-based digital space is what business can do, what the problem is, what the solutions are, and all of these things that we're going to be talking about. So it's a real pleasure to be here with Pablo Brewer, with Jutta Meyer, and with Andres Weiss, our speakers. And without further ado, I'll jump in and ask you in a minute to tell us what brings you to this debate in the first place. Why are you here? Why are you passionate about this topic? And if you could just do that in a sentence. Throughout this session, just to say, we will try and keep the discussion interactive, fast moving, so we can really handle the meat. You know, I'm already doing a lot by talking so much. We'll try and keep it concise. And if you could, in the audience, just type up your questions in the chat as we go, and I'll try and pull them into the discussion, and we will have the Q&A in the end, but just feel yourself as an active participant as we go. So let's go for it and start. Maybe in what you're passionate about and what brings you to this conversation. Pablo, do you want to start?
Sure, Omri, thanks for having me. First, I've got to do a standard business disclosure, which is the views I'm presenting are my own, and they're not necessarily those of my employer. I want to make that clear. I'm very happy to be working where I am, but I'm here kind of to present my views. So what am I passionate about? I'm passionate about technology. I'm passionate about technology for good. One of the things that we've done remarkably well at the end of the 20th century is to really make huge leaps in technology and connectivity. And we did it with kind of these blinders on that everybody was good and these things could not be misused. And that was wonderful, but it turned out that we're human and we have competing interests. And we always asked, could we? And we didn't necessarily ask, should we? And in between there, we didn't ask, how can we do this in a way that's safe and effective? And one of the things that has come out of that is, as we've given individuals powers that formerly belonged only to the heads of nations, i.e. the ability to reach mass populace, what we've seen is a resurgence in disinformation. So I'm passionate about kind of reining in the technology so that it can be used for what it was originally designed for, which is to bring the world together. And I'm passionate about this because even though I'm not in Europe, I am a world citizen, and I'm a parent of young children, and I would like for them to grow up in a.
Yeah, you've, oh, Pablo, you broke up at the end there, but I think you were loud and clear in the message you were getting across. Thanks a lot for that. And I'll pass it straight on to Jutta, who's the co-founder of Identity Valley. And maybe you'd like to come in. I see Pablo is just reconnecting. Yeah, take it away, Jutta.
Thank you. Thanks, Pablo, for your introduction. And I think you wanted to say that it's important to create a world that's still a good one for your children. And I totally agree, of course. So just to end up that sentence, I think. So I'm a mother too, or I'm a mother, and I'm very passionate about technology, and I'm a very curious person. And having been a single mom for about 10 years, was a back then 10-year-old who wanted to learn how to code, which was like 10 years ago. It was very clear that there is just one place in this world to learn about technology and innovation. So I went to Silicon Valley a lot over the last 10 years and was deeply impressed. But as Pablo already said, so technology has been created there, and there was like this feeling we can, and then yeah, we do, and nobody asked should we. They did, and this was something I really felt very closely, because of course I fell in love with the Silicon Valley mindset and how people engaged and created new technologies. But over the years, more and more, it came to my mind, what might be a European answer that might be even better, even be an evolution, maybe build up on our roots, on an enlightenment society, and on values. And so yeah, I founded the Identity Valley as a nonprofit organization, and our credo is it's all about trust. So I'm very passionate about a trustworthy digital world, and this is what we are working on.
Thank you very much, Jutta. And then Andreas, if you could tell us also what brings you here from ECHO, which we see behind you.
Probably you can see ECHO, and ECHO is the Association of the Internet Industry, and we are acting since 25 years in this area. And this might give you already an idea why we are here engaged, because to provide the governance of the internet is not a simple topic by itself. And when we look back into 1995, when internet started in Germany, and what has been developed in the meantime, that the internet was initially an approach to solve some problems for data exchange, information exchange, and now it is the ground for a lot of services which are really affecting the society and how we live and work together, how we interact. So there is a huge level of responsibility to deal with these changes and to navigate us through all these pros and cons which are emerging, of course, and where we need to have a discussion and also find appropriate solution. And in this sense, I think we should really address this term of responsibility, because everyone has a level of responsibility. And if we don't interconnect all these views and bring it into a sound and good shape, which serves at the end of the day for the society, because this is what we should keep an eye on, then we need to bring these, to some extent, very nerdy discussions about technology into a good view and also provide appropriate guidance. So this is really what is driving me, also as a father of 2 children who would like to have a better world at the end of the day, and that we should take care about resources and how we interact and keep the level of humanity between all these technology things.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, yeah, maintaining humanity is a really important point there. I can say from Alliance for Europe's perspective, what we're concerned with is we are seeing these elements out there that are undermining our democracy. And the question is, how can we make sure that there is a 21st century response that maintains a diverse and open and democratic society and is able to move Europe forward based on the values that we believe in to really create the society that we want to live in. I'm not a parent myself yet, but you know, it's something that I think we all feel very strongly nowadays living on this planet. It's hard to ignore, especially in the last couple of days where we had to be off of Facebook for a few hours, which is something that was quite exceptional. So the timing of this discussion really could not be more pertinent. And you know, at a time where there's been a lot of discussion on what the problem is with business models. You know, we've just had another whistleblower come out this week as well. We sort of take for granted that there is a problem if you've been following tech and sort of tech news and these sorts of concerns. But I think we should take the start of this discussion to really narrow down what is the problem with these business models that we're talking about. Is it just one problem? Are there many? How should we tackle them? You know, or should we classify them? So let's spend the first chunk of this discussion really understanding what we mean by the current business model. And so I'll invite our speakers to kind of contribute and move us along on this. I see some comments in the chat already. And then let's start with Pablo. Pablo, based on your broad experience in this, maybe you can give us your perspective.
Sure, thanks. I'm going to say that there are a whole host of issues that have come up. Everything from business model to what we as a global society consider acceptable. But let me address the business model. I'll go back a little bit to Silicon Valley and some things that were done early in the internet age in the US that I think we're still feeling. A lot of conversations here in the US when it comes to internet regulation go back to something called Section 230. And what Section 230 was, and I'll give a very simple overview, was the internet industries going to the United States Congress and saying, we're different than a media like radio and television. And we're a fledgling industry. And so if you hold us to that standard, you're going to stifle innovation and you're going to kill the industry. And the US Congress at the time agreed because most people were still getting their news and their information from physical mail. They were still getting it from the television. They were still getting it from the radio. These things that were somewhat controlled and regulated by the governments, which is to say not censored, but controlled and regulated. You couldn't just hop on the television station and scream things into the void. I think now that a good chunk of the Western world does get their news from the internet, it's perhaps time to reevaluate that so that we can have some sort of provenance of the data. So when news stories come out, we have some knowledge of what the originating point was. And that would let users really decide how much they want to trust the information they're being presented based upon who presented it. The other big problem I think that we have is part of the fledgling industry. The internet tried to apply old business models to this new industry, primarily things like subscription models. And what they found out was that in many cases, it didn't work. And it didn't work because consumers felt like they weren't getting good value for their money. And so they developed a new kind of business model, which we now call the freemium model, where your users are no longer the customer, they're the product. And they're the product in the sense of everything that they say and do on the internet is now tracked and categorized. And despite the fact that it's said that it's done in metadata that is not attributable to an individual human, I think it's safe to say at this point that it absolutely is attributable down to an individual person on the planet. Whether it's by my name, or whether it's by some sort of ID number, or whether it's by the long series of digital DNA I leave across by the things I like and retweet and click on, it's still the same. And what we've done now, and I'm going to be a little bit rambunctious on purpose, is we used to sell people's bodies, and we called it slavery. We decided that was unethical. And then we used to take children and put them in factories to help production. And we decided that that was unethical, that was child labor. I think that, or I would hope that in the next 10 or 20 years, we will look back at what's being done by FANG, by Facebook and Amazon and Apple and Netflix and Google, who control all of the internet, realistically. There's not a service that you can touch on the internet that doesn't cross their infrastructure. And what we're going to realize is that they are selling cognition. They're selling the cognition of all of the users on the internet. And I think that we're going to find that I would hope that we would find that equivalent to a digital slavery or a cognitive slavery, and we will make that illegal, and that we will force a change in the business function to allow people to make better choices and not be tracked, and have realistic choices to not be tracked. Certainly there's a balance there. Advertising wants to present to people most likely to buy, and we like to be presented news stories that we think we're interested in. But there's a balance between that and the very specific targeting that's enabled disinformation on a massive scale throughout the world.
Thank you, Pablo. That was a powerful statement there. And you've really drawn some comparisons that put things into perspective. Jutta, Andreas, do you want to come in and respond to this?
Yeah, if I'm allowed to. Yeah, thanks, Pablo. The only thing I think we need to drill it down a little bit more is when we are talking about the internet, this sounds like a kind of opaque organization which is bundled by anyone who is in the secret behind. And just let us be very clear. The internet in its core sense is a technology to connect whatever would like to be connected. So when we are talking then on the next layer of services which are there are a lot of good services. We are really looking forward to use them also in the future. But the risk I'm seeing when we talk about problems is that due to this narrative, or due to this mission to build up platforms and platforms and platforms, brings too much power to too few organizations. So this is one of the problems we are facing. And this is all related to data. As more data they are getting in their hands, as more they can mandate the platform, the services, and also the market which is out there. So we have we need to differentiate what is the impact for the society, what is the impact for the economy, for the government, and so on and so forth. So what I really would like to see is that we keep a level of differentiation, and please do not talk about the internet or the cloud, because this is a multitude of actors, and we have to look at them for each individually to some extent.
I like how surgical this is becoming. Jutta, and then maybe we can rotate it back to Pablo. But go ahead, Jutta.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I agree with Pablo and Andreas, with both of them, because yeah, of course, there is technology out there. That technology has been built by humans, and it's on us to decide if it's built for humans or not. And I think it's time to take over and to really act responsibly, and to yeah, find a common framework or a common sense or definition of what do we really want to do with all these opportunities, because they are opportunities, and we really should use them much better than we are using them now. And if you look at the roots, for example, of Facebook, it's called social media, but it was a scoring system in the first place, and at university, what Mark Zuckerberg was thinking about. And so this is what it became, and in a way that we don't want to have it. And I think looking to China, it's yeah, kind of the same in other hands. So what the government is doing there, and using technology, and also lots of data from people to build up a scoring system and to really decide what citizens are allowed to do and what not, based on their behavior. It's super scary to me. And so this is why I think, yeah, we need to act really fast now, and we have to bring together people like us, I think, who think about a better solution. And we are working on an action plan. So we developed something that is an idea similar to an idea that already found its place in our world, which is like the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. They've been developed like 20 years ago, and came out of the PowerPoint presentations like 6 years ago. And so many people and organizations, countries are following these ideas on having 17 goals that describe what might be helpful to act sustainably. And yeah, I think it's time to add some digital goals, because when the Sustainable Development Goals have been developed, we couldn't see, and we barely see it today, that there's a lot of power within the digital space, and that affects our society. And so I think we need some digital goals, and this is an idea where we are working on.
Yeah, you're leaving us with a cliffhanger now for what is to come. So yeah, let me maybe rotate back to Pablo and also Andreas. You both pointed to very specific problems. This sort of surveillance business model that we have. There's one question there about, how do we deal with that? Do we make it illegal? Do we require some kind of transparency of the algorithms to make sure that there's some kind of algorithm audit? Is there something else? And then how do we address this concentration of power? Do we have the right legislation in place to address this kind of oligopoly or monopoly? Is our competition law fit for purpose? Or are there other considerations? So maybe Pablo, over to you.
Sure, thanks. So I'm glad you gave us the easy questions, Henri. So the short answer is no, the current regulations that we have are completely insufficient. I think that there needs to be a re-examination of that. I was interacting with somebody on the chat that was talking about what the current state of affairs is, as opposed to what it was when it was decided. And I think what we're finding out, Western law has always been rearward looking. In the West, we tend to wait for things to happen and a case to come before the court, and then we say, well, there's nothing like this prior, and the current laws aren't really applicable, so now we need to go back and tell our governments to create new laws. The problem in the internet age is that the issues come so quickly and at such a massive scale that we can no longer afford for things to go wrong before we legislate. We really have to be a little bit more forward-looking. And a lot of these things are a balance. So going to the surveillance economy, the attention economy, should it be outlawed? I think we don't have to be that drastic. I think we can put limitations on it. Certainly there is a broad industry of advertisement, and they want to be as effective with their advertising money as possible. And I think that on the whole, that is for the public good. What needs to happen is a discussion about what is an appropriate amount of information to collect, and then how long can that information be kept? To my mind, it's okay to collect information on groups of people and say, African-American women between the age of 35 and 45 tend to be receptive to these messages. It is not okay to go, Tammy's going to be receptive to this message. So I think broad groups are okay, but specifics are not. This is a lesson that's been well learned in academia. So having some sort of review board before we discuss, targeting of individuals for messaging, I think is important. And then how long that could stick around. I think GDPR was a fantastic first step, but it was a first step. California came back with the California Consumer Protection Act, and it took things a little bit further, but we're not there yet. We have a long way to go. The other thing that came up was that ethics around the world are different. And that's absolutely true. My favorite example of that is an abuse of what's called the trolley problem. And I'll restate my abuse of it, which is I have a fully autonomous AI car. And it's in a situation where it absolutely will hit one of two people. It will hit somebody in their 80s, or it'll hit a young child less than 10. In the West, our ethics would dictate that we hit the older person because the older person's lived their life and the young person has promised they really hadn't had an opportunity. In the East, they would say hit the young person because we can't replicate the wisdom of the old person. Now, I can see the argument both ways, and I don't know that there's a right answer there, but we need to be able to communicate what the answer is for our society so that everybody agrees. There are some common grounds where I think the entire world can agree. And the last time we did something like this really was the Geneva Convention, right? War is an awful thing, but the world was able to come together and go, listen, these things are so atrocious that they'll be outlawed by the entire world and they're not accepted by the entire world. I think we can do something like that. The last bit, as far as the oligarchy, I absolutely believe that there's a problem when you can't access any service on the internet without hitting one of 4 or 5 companies' infrastructure. That's a problem, and it needs to be dealt with in the harshest manner possible because there's no way to deal with that safely unless it goes to a global organization like the UN or something similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm keeping an eye on the time because we're also, we have a long way to go in our discussion. Andreas, maybe I'm gonna lay down a bridge for you to take us from this problem discussion towards the solution. Now, everything that Pablo was saying, addresses this sort of multi-layered issue that we're dealing with. And, you also raised this problem of concentration of power in the market. But there's another layer of this, which is what is the issue that European businesses are facing as compared with, let's say American businesses or other areas? What are the choices that they face? And then maybe you can take us from a view of the problem to a view of the solution and kind of lead the way there.
Well, let me just first say, especially on behalf of ECHO, asking for regulation is nothing we are doing in the first place. So first, talk to the stakeholders and try to isolate the problem wherever we see some problems. And luckily, some of these digital platforms took the action in terms of self-regulation. They just shut them off for 6 hours just to get an idea of what happens then. And when I was seeing then the responses, especially by the digital natives who said, oh, Jesus, I was not able to tell my parents I will be late. So I would say the response would be, well, this is a phone. You can take this old-fashioned phone call and talk to others. You don't need all these social platforms to interact with other humans. There are other means how to get in touch. So I think we have a lack of education anyway. Now, coming back to this question about the European economy, and first of all, let me say, Europe is a federated construct of member states. So they always like this level of self-determination. We have joint regulation by the Commission, by the EU, and we have our own regulation. And just to let you know, in Germany, we have 16 responsible data privacy authorities, which is a challenge by itself because we are also federated. This leads us now to the conceptual approach that Well, isn't it? So we need this federated approach. We need always a level of self-determination. And what was also one of the triggers when we look at the offerings, the digital offerings, there are just too few options. There are some multi or hyperscalers who are offering an excellent service portfolio, which is really good, but there is a reasonable level of lock-in. And we have another issue to address. We need to decentralize our digital environments. We had this cloud-centric approach in the past, and now we are moving in the edge to the smart cities, to the shop floor, to all the people. When we talk about smart mobility cannot be managed by cloud-centric offerings because even the light speed is limited. So if you want to go into this real-time processing, you need processing units cross over the countries. And then Mrs. von der Leyen already announced we need more than 10,000 edges in Europe, and this is just the beginning. So this is mainly the concept of Gaia X, to reshape digital infrastructures more on this cloud to edge continuum, to decentralize the workloads and the processing of data. And the key objective is to drive for innovation. So we are not talking how to build up a European hyperscale or something. It's mainly how to apply innovation for the European economy. When we talk about AI, when we talk about application of blockchain, industrial IoT, all these fancy things which are emerging now, which hopefully will help us to enhance the capacities by reducing the resources which are needed to deal with such business models. And in this case, looking at this decentralization approach, the federation approach, which is also a governance issue, how to build up federations. One of them is, for example, Catena X for the automotive industry. We have also other federations. So these are people who are working together to build up on a common rule set and joint technology, interoperable, decentralized data processing infrastructures. And this will hopefully help us a lot to rebalance also the forces, to provide more participation even of European SMEs, scale-ups, startups, to be part of this digital value chain. And yeah, this should be a kind of rebalancing approach, which really serves for the needs, because the trigger came by the industry. They said, we want to share data, we need to keep the sovereignty about the data. I don't want to hand over my data to anyone and then it's going across the world, because this is also intellectual property. And I really like the GDPR for personal information. And we need something similar to deal with non-personal information, because it is intellectual property of each of the enterprises around here.
Yeah, that's a really important
finally
point.
consumers. So.
Yeah, so I think you raised some really important points there. I have a few follow-up questions, but I'll move it over to Jutta. And let's just be aware of the timing. It's just so interesting, and the points that you're making are so good that I'm being much more lenient with the time than I was going to be. But Jutta, go ahead.
Okay, I will try to keep it short. So actually, Andreas and Pablo already said or mentioned two of our digital responsibility goals, because as Andreas said, we do have a lack of education, and we think this is the very first topic we need to address. So we call it digital literacy. It's our first digital responsibility goal. So we need to educate everyone, children, that they are aware of their identity, of their data when interacting with the internet, when using these technologies, when using apps. It's not the internet, as Andreas said. It depends on what do you do with your data, and with your fingertips, you can start a war, or you can build something great. And so digital literacy for us is the first key to educate really everyone on the chance to use the technologies of today for the good. And as Pablo mentioned, GDPR, this is our goal number 3, privacy. It's super important. And we do have one in the middle, that's cybersecurity, because we need the technological basis for everything. So it's digital literacy in the first place, then cybersecurity and privacy. Privacy is a GDPR, or GDPR is a European first step. And we really created something that is good. And first everyone was like, oh no, we have to deal with that. But now everyone is, yeah, but that's the right direction. And if you can build something that can be used in Europe, then you can use it everywhere. And this is a good way, I think. So then our 4th goal is called data fairness, which is a new framing. So, and we are currently working with the Eco Association, with Andreas and his team, on definitions around all of these goals, because we want to match them to the platform Andreas already mentioned, Gaia X, because we think if we do have other understanding in all these topics, how we can share data in a fair way, then that might be super helpful. And trustworthy algorithms are super important to build artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, whatever, but the basis, again, is important. So the algorithms have to be trustworthy, and we need transparency, of course. And then we close our goals with us again. It's about human agency and identity. It's us, it's on us, and yeah, we should be the ones being the responsible leaders in that game. And this is what we just presented to the European Parliament and discussed with the European Commission also. And we're working heavily on that with the Eco Association.
So then, because you're very naturally bridging us into what European decision makers can do, so I'll just sort of press you on. What do you think that European leaders should do here? I think Andreas was pointing in the direction of quite a few different things that could happen, referring also to what Ursula von der Leyen was saying. But Jutta, what should European leaders do with these digital responsibility goals that you're proposing? That was an easy question, but
actually, we are super happy that we had the chance, and we are still in that discussion, talking to them, because as we all know, all of these topics are somehow addressed from different stakeholders, not just in the European Parliament or the Commission, but also all over the world. So AI and ethics is a big, big topic where many, many institutions are working on. And I think we have to bring together all these good approaches and bring them under one roof, and agree that we need to act together and follow a framework that helps us to act responsibly, and so that every citizen, every user of technology can be aware of there is a European digital service that I can trust, or there is a European digital product that I can use, and I can put my children into an autonomous car that was built there, because I know who has been behind that, and I know there is no it's a trusted environment where I come into. And I think regarding the European Commission and Parliament, we need some agreements, and we need to have some multi-stakeholder debates on this. And I'm also very happy that you are working into that field as well, Omri, and we are very happy to be working with you on these topics, because we are new to that field. We do have this approach, and we are a very young nonprofit organization, but I think we need to bring together many, many people and talk about these topics.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jutta. I see that there's quite a lot of comments in the chat. I'm reading through some of them and trying to process them also while listening. Pablo, I saw that you had your hand up, and I think it would be interesting to also get a transatlantic perspective on what the EU and US and perhaps others could do together.
Sure, absolutely. First thing I wanted to do was highlight something that Jutta said about education. And this actually folds back to your question about what can what can the EU government do? Education is something that often comes up when there's an issue of any kind, whether it's technology or otherwise. What we fail to account for is that with these issues in particular, it's not sufficient to educate the children. We have to educate the adults, and we have to educate the lawmakers. I think one of the things that is perhaps not been as prominent as it should be, and it's certainly absent from the US government, is a nonpartisan group that are experts in technology and ethics that can brief and advise government as they pass these laws. It's really going to take a village. Anytime you talk about regulation of any kind, the first cry from industry is it kills innovation, and it becomes a Chicken Little thing. And I am sensitive to that. We don't want to kill innovation, but there are some things that need to be done much more slowly and much more deliberately with some amount of oversight and controls, because they have really dire second and third order effects that could happen to individuals and societies if we don't guard for those. So what could the EU do? I think the EU and the rest of the world could really bring together a coalition of technologists, industry, academia, and government to discuss these issues. One of the challenges with this is not unique to a segment of the population. It really it's a multifaceted problem with challenges on all accounts. And instead of having a conference for government and a conference for academia and a conference for industry, we need one conference that has players from across the spectrum, so we can be in the same room and hear what each other's concerns and problems are, and talk about this honestly. Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. The first ones I guarantee will not be useful from an end product perspective, but what should come out of it is hopefully a lot of connections and the start of a lot of discussion, so that in further events we can make forward progress. But I think right now the fact that these different groups are talking about these problems separately and they're within their own echo chamber is really hampering making any sort of forward progress.
Yeah, indeed. I think what you're saying very much resonated. Alliance for Europe essentially got together as groups of individuals and organizations from different walks of life, essentially wanted to bring together academia, civil society, the media sector, business, and so on, to really foster some larger scale action on this issue of democracy. And that is definitely something that we're feeling with internet governance and with this whole approach to building up a digital space that we want to be in, because at the moment we have a conversation where the EU is legislating. There's the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, and many, many more, but we have different people in different corners of the conversation making very, very important points and demands on the legislators, but they're not necessarily talking to each other. So we have people talking about human rights on one side, people talking about disinformation on another side, people talking about business models somewhere else in the conversations, and so on and so forth. It goes on. And the question is, how can we bring these stakeholders together? And so this is also why we were interested in doing this with United Europe, but also why we're continuing this further. And all the participants here and everyone watching can definitely look us up and find out what more we're doing. Follow us on social media, of course. That's the ironic shout out that we need to put out there, of course. But then that was just a little bit of my plug. Andreas, I wanted to come back to you and what you were saying earlier in terms of this whole infrastructure of data sharing and the computing power that we need in Europe. Do you feel like there is enough investment being made? Is the European commitment strong enough?
Well, yeah, there is a very huge commitment, but just due to the COVID impact. So now it's the time they have understood we have to do something in this area, because we have these very huge dependencies. And in this sense, I think Gaia X is good to go. And we have this IPSE CRS, so this cloud infrastructure approach to establish cloud edge infrastructures across over Europe. This is underway, close to the notification procedure. and hopefully it will come to action. We have a lot of strategies, but what is really pushing us back is all this regulation, which is triggered by individual events or situations. I would like to see that the EU Commission is more taking the role to provide guardrailing, so just to narrow down these misbalances which are seen here, and not to overregulate the market itself, because we see a lot of problems raising just by these regulation in good faith, of course, but what happens then at the end is quite difficult, even for the European economy. And the EU should take their own narrative serious. When we talk about free flow of data, then we need free flow of data, at least in the European Union. When we talk about sovereign identities, then we need to apply sovereign identities across over Europe. This takes much too long. So, and these are the key areas. Without sovereign identities, all the rest is nonsense. And we still stay with the identities which are provided by those who are not really have a similar understanding about human rights as we see it in Europe. So take this serious, provide your own services. I'm quite surprised why we are not capable in Europe to provide a GDPR compliant video conferencing service on large scale. So this is a joke by itself. There is a full demand and there are a lot of complaints, but we are still not capable to provide such a service with a sufficient level of resilience and quality of service. And this is something where we need to be much faster than we did before.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point. I'm going to move us to the Q&A. I just think it's interesting that you say, on the one hand, you don't, you as ECHO are not looking for sort of regulation responding to particular events, more guardrailing, but you are very much emphasizing at the same time that we need European services and capacities based on these values and these regulations that are in place. So I think I'm hearing a degree of nuance there. Maybe I'll just pull a few questions out of the chat and then we can open it up. There were a few comments in there about this issue of Europe and the world, you know, like China is very large, Africa, very large, Middle East, and the US and the EU really needs to sort of balance what it does in that global perspective. So can we have a global dialogue on this? Are the values too far apart? Is there meaningful action that Europe can take alone? Very simple and easy questions. Who wants to jump in and address that? Pablo?
Yeah, I'll jump in and I'll actually give a very simple answer. I don't think that the US and the EU are very far apart at all. I think there's a lot of good work that can be done. Somebody posted a comment about, hey, EU regulates and then China and the US, what? They're, you know, EU uses Amazon and Google just like the US. They don't have different internets. But that's exactly the point. And one of the lessons learned, I think for me, for GDPR is, after the screams and the yells and the lamentations of industry, the internet industry about GDPR, once it was implemented, everybody did it throughout the world, right? And so Google and Facebook and Apple decided, you know what, if we're going to be forced to do this in Europe, it's just easier to do it everywhere and not have to deal with the idiosyncrasies of where the user's located and where do they hold their citizenship. So I think that's exactly the point, that Europe and the US can work together. We all use the same internet. We all seem to use, for the most part, the same services. And I think we have a lot more that draws us together than breaks us apart. I think we can definitely come up with a larger set of things that we find acceptable and come up with some common sense norms and standards.
Thanks a lot. So I think I'll invite the participants to actually ask their questions, so it's a bit more active and lively. We've been hearing each other's voices, which was nice, but let's open it up. Maybe Diria, would you like to just speak out your question about exponential growth?
Yes, sure. So I was thinking to legislate always takes ages until something actually gets through. How can that actually go along the exponential growth we see with technology platforms? They're changing exponentially, they're growing exponentially. Like what was maybe the case 2 months ago is no longer the case today. So how can legislators then keep up with that and pass meaningful laws?
Who wants to take it? Andreas is sort of smiling.
I need to be very careful on this topic because first of all, I'm not a lawyer. Second, I'm very pragmatic, and unfortunately, legislation is not always pragmatic. So what we try here is to bring more tangible conceptual approaches how to build up a new digital environment, which hopefully helps them just by showcasing what is possible, how we get a reasonable level of self-determination back in our hands, and how to rebalance these mismatches we are obviously seeing here. And I'm really not a friend to deal in these blocks of here is the US and there is Europe and there is China. To be honest, I don't care. So either we are strong enough as European to have our own voice and to keep our future in our own hands, or we are just consumers of the rest of the world. So this is a decision we have to take here, which doesn't mean that we have to exclude other markets or other players. And I'm totally a friend to say, yeah, also the hyperscalers are fully welcome in Gaia X because they have a good portfolio, but as long as they are committed on our core rules in the EU, and as long as we have this balanced approach and participation of other players within this digital value chain, as I mentioned. And we have a very good response from Japan, from South Korea, from India, from Brazil, but even from the US and from China, because they say, what you're addressing with Gaia X to break these silos in terms of data management, to rebalance the interaction in the economy, we are seeing the same problem. Potentially not those who are currently in the pole position, but there are a lot of other parties and enterprises and governments who are saying we need to go into this direction. I see a good chance that, as we see with GDPR, that this model, this conceptual model, can be taken by all other economies as well as a guiding principle, because we are living in a global world. Looking at Germany and the automotive industry, they are selling their cars across over the world, and they need also touch points in Shenzhen and Pittsburgh, wherever they are going to act. And in this sense, we cannot stop our activities around the internet in Portugal or in Poland. So this is nonsense. So it's a digital world, and we have to deal with it.
Yeah, indeed, we can't avoid connectivity. I would just like to invite some of the others who've asked questions, maybe Christina, perhaps Dolly, if you would like to respond or to push on. Hi, Christina, go for it.
Hi, thank you everyone for the lovely presentation and discussion. I asked a couple of questions, and I think partially I was even in conversation with some of the other participants. I would maybe ask my first question because, well, it was the first one I asked. So a lot of the discussion was around, to some extent, you know, what values we should think about, but also what it felt to me was about who should be responsible, or maybe where should we put the burden of responsibility, the burden of managing risks, the burden of thinking through consequences of actions. And my first question was, is that perhaps a question that is limited to new technologies, to social media, which was heavily discussed now, Or is it perhaps part of a broader conversation around what role we see for businesses, for private sector actors in general in society, and technology is just having the impact of making this crystallize more clearly and drawing our attention to the problem? But I mean,
Yeah.
from my question, you see, I already kind of have made up my mind, but I'm very happy to, hear contradictory opinions and just enrich my point of view. Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe Jutta, if you'd like to take this one, who should be responsible for the digital responsibility goals?
Everyone. It's on us. It's everyone. I think I'm really convinced we need responsible leadership, and everyone is able to act responsibly. So, and if we bring together people from wherever and agree on a common purpose, then of course a definition of a value is different in China, is different in Europe, it's different in the US, and what kind of background you live in, culture you came from, and you come from, and but acting responsibly and following some rules, but not just those being made by lawyers, but those that we agree on, and those we want to see a positive narrative and act as the good ones, working in not just digital technologies. Christina said it. So it's of course it's a combination, and we do see that bridge to the Sustainable Development Goals. I think they also need some technological power behind, and we can do that together. So all these people here being experts in any kind of digital technologies, that we may be helpful to even push further the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we bring in some digital responsibility goals, our goals are focused on 2025. Because we need to act fast, like Andrea stated, and the Sustainable Development Goals, as you all know, are focused on 2030. So there's a 5 years bridge where we can bring them together, and this is what we want to do. And so I'm inviting everyone to be part of that journey, that movement.
Thank you very much, Jutta. And then now, just with an eye on the time, I think we can do maybe just a key learnings sort of round. For me, I think this strong message that we've seen coming out from what all of you have said essentially entails bringing together the different actors in the field and being able to empower each one of them in a global conversation around really getting to the values that we want to see. And I very much resonated with what each one of you have said, actually, with Andreas, talking about the need for infrastructure, Pablo really talking about, looking back in the future and seeing that this unethical behavior we're seeing is a thing of the past, and Jutta hopefully setting out an agenda that can lead us there into that future. So maybe just 3 words from each speaker on your key learning, just half a sentence if you could, to keep it short. Pablo?
Okay, I'm going to say ethical technology, common global agreement for standards, and a multifaceted approach to these issues.
Good, thank you very much. That was maybe 9 words, I wasn't counting. Andreas?
Yeah, I think this discussion is very important. Although we are looking for business values, we need to keep an eye on the society and the values for everyone. And if we don't bridge this and we don't explain it, it is a failure by default. So keep this discussion and look that we are getting aligned with all the activities.
Yeah, and Jutta?
It's on us. Let's do it.
Yeah. Great. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Feel free to follow us at Alliance for Europe as well. We'll have a few more of these initiatives and workshops coming up. And thank you very much to the speakers. And again, I'm going to thank Diria, James, and the United Europe team. And then I think that's it for me. I'll pass it on to Diria for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Omri. for putting this all together, for moderating this wonderful event. And thank you, speakers, for being here and for kicking off this very important discussion. Couldn't come more timely than now. And everyone has a good evening. I wish everyone a good evening. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.